Ladies and gentlemen, there is a quiet tragedy unfolding in the hearts of many, perhaps even in yours. It doesn't come with explosions. It doesn't scream. It doesn't march down the street. No, it whispers. It whispers in the choices you make when your voice is quieted to accommodate another's. It creeps in every time you say yes when your soul aches for no. We live in a world that rewards smiles, obedience, and the illusion of harmony. But behind that mask, many of us are dying slowly, not physically but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Today, I want to speak to you about why pleasing others is slowly destroying you, and how to reclaim the self you've abandoned. Let's explore 5 key truths. You betray your authentic self not in one swift, conscious act, but through 1,000 small abandonments, each one subtle, each one sanctioned by a whisper that says, "This is what they want from me." And slowly, without ceremony, you exile the voice that once rose pure and clear within you. The soul, which longs to unfold in its own mysterious rhythm, begins to bend under the weight of borrowed expectations. You look into the mirror and do not quite recognize the gaze that stares back. Something in you has become a stranger. Something in you has learned to hide. We are not born inauthentic. In the earliest years of life, we cry when we are hungry, laugh when we are delighted, scream when we are wounded. There is no performance, no audience to please. The child is whole, undivided, until it meets the world's conditions. Be quiet, be good, be what I need you to be. These commands, spoken or implied, do not fall upon deaf ears. They take root. For the child, approval is survival, and survival becomes the compass. Love is mistaken for obedience. Acceptance is bartered with self-erasure, but the cost is incalculable. As we conform, as we adapt, we build what is often called the persona, not merely a social role, but a carefully constructed mask, polished and pleasing. This mask smiles at the right times, agrees when it should, and grows increasingly skilled at reading the room, even if it forgets how to read the heart. It is rewarded, even celebrated. We become charming, likable, successful. Yet within us, the authentic self, the one that does not care to perform, begins to whisper in dreams, in sudden bursts of sadness, in inexplicable restlessness. It knows we are not living our own lives. It is no small matter to betray oneself. When the inner voice is dismissed again and again, when desire is suppressed in favor of acceptance, a fracture appears within the psyche. One part of us continues outward, forward, smiling while another part watches silently from the shadows. The split is not dramatic, but insidious. A person may appear entirely functional, even thriving, and yet feel hollow, disconnected from purpose or joy. The danger lies not in failure, but in success that belongs to the wrong self. We do not only lose authenticity, we lose vitality. When we deny who we truly are, we starve the soul of its natural nourishment, expression, creativity, spontaneity, truth. We become cautious in our passions, hesitant in our convictions. We guess what once felt instinctive. We fear that honesty will result in abandonment. So we conform, we repress. We become masters of adaptation, exiles from our own being. The soul, however, is not infinitely patient. Eventually it rebels. This rebellion may come in the form of anxiety, depression, unexplained fatigue, or a creeping numbness that renders all things colorless. These are not signs of weakness, but signals. The soul is crying out for liberation, for reunion with its lost self. But to listen, we must dare to confront the uncomfortable truth. We have been living a life dictated not by inner necessity, but by outer expectation. Studies, like the one published in 2016 in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, affirm what our inner knowing has whispered all along. When we habitually suppress our desires, particularly in relationships, we experience a marked decline in emotional well-being. We become caretakers of others' feelings while abandoning our own. We become reliable, agreeable, and deeply unhappy. Life satisfaction erodes not because life is cruel, but because we have ceased to be present in our own story. To recover the self is not a matter of defiance, but of devotion. It requires a radical honesty not with the world, but with oneself. What do I truly want? What do I believe beneath the noise of public opinion? What is the life that waits for me beneath this mask? These questions cannot be answered quickly. They must be lived. The path back to the self is not paved with answers, but with listening to dreams, to instincts, to longings that have waited patiently for acknowledgement. There is great fear in returning to oneself. The mask, after all, has brought safety. To remove it is to risk rejection, but what we often fail to see is that the rejection has already occurred. We rejected ourselves first, hoping the world would love us in return. And if we are unloved in our truth, then the love we have received is counterfeit, a fragile substitute. Real connection, the kind that enlivens and expands us, can only be formed through authenticity. And authenticity demands courage. You were not born to fulfill someone else's vision. You were born with a unique pattern, an inner design as distinct as a fingerprint. The task of your life is not to perfect the mask, but to reveal the soul. This may mean disappointing others. It may mean walking away from roles that once defined you. But in doing so, you step towards something infinitely greater, your own wholeness. And from this place, you can offer the world something it does not already have, the full presence of a person who dares to be real. The journey inward is not easy. It may feel lonely at times, but the loneliness of authenticity is far more sacred than the company earned through self-betrayal. For in that solitude, you will find yourself again, not the persona, not the performer, but the one who has always been waiting behind the curtain, quiet and unyielding. And that self, once reclaimed, becomes a source of profound power. No applause can replace it. No approval can surpass it. To live in truth is to live in alignment, and when you do not merely exist, you radiate. You inspire. You become a mirror in which others see their own lost selves. For authenticity is not a private achievement, but a collective liberation. When one person chooses to be real, they create a permission slip for others to do the same. And in this way, the world begins to heal not through perfection, but through presence. So the question stands, quietly and insistently. How long will you live as a guest in your own life? When will you return to the home that is your soul, to the truth that does not shift with the tides of approval? The moment you choose yourself fully, fiercely, unapologetically is the moment you begin to live, not as a mask, but as a miracle. Imagine, for a moment, your emotional world as a vast, living garden. Every word you chose not to speak, every boundary you allowed to be crossed, every time you said yes when your very soul was screaming no, each of these moments plants a seed. These are not seeds of love, nor of service, nor of virtue. They are seeds of resentment. Quiet, hidden, subtle at first, they take root in the unconscious soil, and because they are unseen, they grow wild and tangled beneath the surface of your life. You may continue to wear the smile. You might continue to show up, to serve, to give, but there is something growing in the dark. A heaviness begins to take hold not just in your mind, but in your very being. Each time you betray yourself in the name of peace, in the name of duty, in the name of being the good one. A debt is written, an emotional debt, and these debts, if never addressed, will one day demand their payment with interest. You may think you are maintaining harmony, that you are choosing love, but what is growing inside you is not love. It is the shadow. It is the part of you that has been banished, ignored, denied its voice. The longer you suppress it, the more it festers. It will begin to speak to you in strange ways, a tightening in the chest, a sudden tear, a sharp word that escapes your lips before you realize it. It will show itself in your dreams, in your illness, in your inexplicable bitterness. It becomes a silent force, shaping your thoughts, your relationships, your very sense of self. I recall a woman who once told me her story, not with anger, but with a kind of bewildered sorrow. She was in her 50s, a wife, a mother, a pillar of her community. By all external measures, she had done everything right. She had loved well, served deeply, sacrificed greatly, but there was an emptiness in her eyes, as though some vital flame had flickered out long ago. She said, "I don't even know what I want anymore. I've been needed for so long, I forgot how to need myself." What was most haunting in her voice was not regret, but confusion, as if she could not locate herself inside her own life. She had built a temple of devotion, brick by brick, over the course of decades, and yet, in the center of it, she could no longer find the worshipper. She had been present for everyone else, but absent to herself. Her sacrifice had not been sacred. It had been a slow abandonment. The tragedy of resentment is not merely that it isolates you from others, though it does. The greater tragedy is that it separates you from your own soul. You begin to feel invisible, not because others do not see you, but because you no longer see yourself. You feel unloved, not because love is absent, but because you have forgotten how to receive it. You feel used, not because others are cruel, but because you have made yourself into a vessel for their needs, while pouring your own essence out with every unspoken ache. There is a part of us ancient, instinctive, that knows when we are living inauthentically, and it rebels, it revolts, not loudly at first, but subtly, insidiously, through fatigue that no rest cures, through irritation that no reason explains, through relationships that feel draining, where once there was joy. This is not a failure of character. This is the soul trying to reclaim its voice. To live without resentment, one must be fiercely honest. One must learn to say no, with the same clarity and compassion with which one says yes. One must choose boundaries, not as walls of separation, but as the lines that define the sacredness of one's inner garden. Not every invitation is meant to be accepted. Not every demand is yours to fulfill. Love without truth is not love, it is appeasement. Service without authenticity is not noble, it is self-erasure. There is a story we are taught, often silently, that the highest form of love is selflessness. But the psyche does not believe this. The psyche knows that love must include the self, or else it is martyrdom, and martyrdom, though revered in myth, is a form of emotional suicide when lived day to day. You cannot pour from an empty vessel, and when you do, what spills out is not love, but exhaustion, resentment, and eventually rage. The shadow does not come to destroy you. It comes to show you what you have forgotten. It comes to remind you that your needs matter, that your desires have weight, that your anger, when honored, is not destructive, it is directional. It points to where your soul has been silenced. It beckons you back to wholeness. And wholeness is not perfection. It is not being everything to everyone. It is not endless giving without rest. Wholeness is the sacred balance between service and sovereignty, between compassion and clarity. It is knowing when to give and when to guard, when to speak and when to be still, when to hold and when to let go. Resentment, then, is a messenger, a dark herald of your unmet needs, and if you ignore it, it will become your master. But if you listen, truly listen, it will guide you home, home to the part of you that has waited patiently, silently, hoping you would remember yourself. The garden of the soul does not thrive on sacrifice alone. It requires sunlight, water, and boundaries. It needs you to choose yourself not instead of others, but alongside them. For only when you are rooted in your own truth can you offer something real to the world. And so, when resentment arises, do not shame it. Do not suppress it. Sit with it. Ask what it needs to say. Ask where you betrayed yourself. Ask where you abandoned your own heart. Then, with gentleness and courage, begin the work of repair. Reclaim the parts of you left behind. Speak the truth you swallowed. Forgive the self you forgot. For the soul is not lost. It is only waiting for you to see it, to hear it, to choose it once more. When a person begins to silence themselves for the sake of harmony, they begin the slow erosion of their inner voice. There is an archetypal truth in this one that lies deeper than the surface mechanics of personality. It resides in the collective pattern of the psyche, where the individual, fearing disconnection or abandonment, learns to make themselves small in the presence of others. But what begins as an innocent attempt to be loved can quickly become a prison built from invisible bars, each forged from unspoken words and suppressed needs. To accommodate at all times is to abandon the sacred self. One believes they are fostering peace, but they are, in truth, cultivating a false persona, and this mask, worn too long, becomes a beacon not for love or companionship, but for those who sense opportunity in the void of your boundaries. There are those who do not seek to know you, but to consume the version of you that never protests. They arrive like moths to a flame, drawn not by the light of your soul, but by the warmth of your silence. You become a silent servant to their needs, a background character in the drama of their lives, invisible in your own. This is not merely a social or psychological issue. It is a spiritual one. The soul begins to ache when it is not allowed to speak. The body, too, participates in the protest, whispering anxiety into your bones, tightening your chest with the weight of unmet truth. There is a deep cost to being agreeable at the expense of authenticity. You fracture yourself. You split off pieces of your being and place them into storage, hoping the world will love you more if you are less. And in doing so, you attract those who are comfortable living among fragments, not wholes. Emotionally immature individuals do not seek your boundaries because boundaries require engagement, reflection, and mutual respect. They seek instead the pliable, the yielding, the one who nods rather than speaks. Their radar is not attuned to love but to utility, and so the more you become the person who never disagrees, who always complies, the more you are surrounded by those who never truly see you. You become invisible in the very spaces where you long to be known. There is a haunting beauty in the notion that silence can be magnetic, but this magnetism is not benign. It draws not connection but consumption. Your silence becomes a mirror in which others see only themselves. And in that reflection, your truth is lost. You teach them unknowingly that your needs are negotiable, that your feelings are expendable. You teach them that your silence is consent. This is the tragedy of the people, pleaser. They are not weak. They are warriors of the heart, often shaped by early wounds and unmet emotional needs. But their battle is misdirected. They fight for peace outside while waging war within. They long for connection, but sacrifice their soul to achieve it. And what they receive in return is not love, but conditional approval, a fleeting substitute that never fills the void. Dr. Harriet Breaker spoke of the disease to please, and rightly so. It is a pathology of the spirit. Chronic people, pleasers, become weary in ways that sleep cannot fix. They feel hollowed out, disconnected from their instincts, unsure of who they are when no one is around to reflect approval. They often find themselves entangled in relationships that drain rather than nourish, where love feels like obligation and presence feels like performance. The soul begins to whisper warnings through the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and resentment. But still, many do not listen, for they fear that if they stop pleasing, they will stop mattering. And yet, the truth remains. If you do not define your worth, someone else will, and their version of your worth will be in service to their convenience, not your wholeness. You will be reduced to roles caretaker, cheerleader, fixer, none of which are you in your entirety. They will write your script and hand it to you with a smile, and you, longing to belong, will perform it until your spirit breaks beneath the weight of your own absence. But there is a way back. There is a reclamation that begins not with rage, but with truth. It is the moment you decide that your voice matters, even if it shakes. It is the sacred instant you choose discomfort over dishonesty. It is when you realize that those who only love your silence were never in love with your soul. To speak, to assert, to draw the sacred circle of self-respect, these are not acts of aggression, but acts of liberation. They are the rituals through which the self is reborn. You do not need to explain your boundaries to those who honor them, and you will find in time that the more you live in truth, the fewer explanations you need to give. The ones who truly see you will not flee from your no. They will not punish your needs. They will celebrate your wholeness, for it echoes their own longing for truth. You must understand that your truth is not a weapon, but a compass. It guides you back to yourself when the world has asked you to abandon who you are. Your voice is not too much. Your needs are not a burden. Your presence is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to be known. You are not here to be palatable, you are here to be powerful. So let those who require your silence depart. Let those who only stay when you suppress your soul find quieter echoes elsewhere. You are not their solution. You are your own sanctuary, and from this place of truth, you will begin to attract those who are not threatened by your voice, but called to it. It is not your job to make yourself easier to swallow. It is your birthright to be whole, and wholeness does not require permission. It only requires that you remember that you were never meant to be silent. You were meant to sing. There is a silent sorrow that spreads in the soul when one's life becomes an echo of other people's expectations. At first it may feel like duty, like love, like the noble act of sacrifice. You find pride in the approval of your parents, your peers, your mentors. You adopt their visions as your own, thinking it virtuous. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, a numbness grows. You are no longer driven by the flame within, but by the flickering shadows of what others want for you. You become a mirror, polished and reflective, but empty of your own substance. The danger is not in caring for others that is natural and necessary. The danger is in the quiet, persistent erosion of your own direction. Without a clear purpose anchored in your own soul, you drift. The compass within, once attuned to your unique calling, begins to spin aimlessly. You respond to life rather than create it, and this reactionary existence breeds not only dissatisfaction, but disconnection from your deepest truth. I met a man once who embodied this quiet tragedy. At a retreat nestled in the mountains, far from the hum of his corporate world, he confessed the weight he carried. For 2 decades, he had excelled in a prestigious job, accumulating accolades and wealth, a model of success in the eyes of the world. But the suit he wore each morning was not stitched from desire, but from obligation. It was his father's dream he had been living, not his own. He had done everything right, and still felt utterly wrong. When I asked him what he would do if no one judged him, he did not hesitate. "I'd write children's books," he said, and his voice trembled with a mix of shame and longing. Imagine that a man of immense intelligence and capability, living 45 years without ever trying the one thing that stirred his soul, not because he lacked talent or opportunity, but because he had internalized the belief that his true passion was somehow trivial, unworthy of his pursuit. That belief was not born of reason, but of fear, the fear of disappointing others, of straying from the script written for him. He had mastered the art of fitting in, but had lost the map to himself. This is not an isolated tale. It is the quiet epidemic of our time, people succeeding in lives that are not truly theirs. We have made a virtue of conformity and a vice of inner longing. We shame the artist who chooses poverty for the sake of creation. We scoff at the dreamer who walks away from comfort to follow an inner call. But what is the price of ignoring your calling? It is not only personal, it is collective. A world filled with misaligned lives is a world filled with quiet desperation, with lost innovations, with unlived stories. We must begin to listen to the whispers within. They often speak quietly, especially after years of being silenced. They may not scream in grand declarations, but in subtle longings, the kind that tug at you during quiet moments, that visit you in dreams, that make your heart ache when you think of roads not taken. These are not childish fantasies. They are sacred messages from the depths of your being, urging you to live authentically, to bring forth what only you can bring. To live without direction is to wander in a fog, guided only by the lights of others. And though their path may be bright, it will never fully illuminate your way. You may borrow their goals, mimic their steps, adopt their values, but the dissonance will remain, because you are not here to repeat another's life. You are here to unfold your own. You were born with specific gifts, a unique temperament, a voice unlike any other. To suppress that in the name of approval is not humility, it is a form of self-betrayal. There is something fiercely alive in a person who is living from their purpose. You can see it in their eyes, feel it in their words, sense it in their presence. They are not necessarily wealthy or famous or applauded, but they are whole, their actions are coherent with their inner world, they do not wake with dread or fall asleep with regret. Even in failure they feel alignment, even in struggle they feel meaning. Because they are not acting to please, they are acting to express, to create, to embody. Purpose is not a luxury reserved for the lucky few. It is not a privilege, it is a necessity of the soul, and it is never too late to seek it. The man from the retreat eventually did begin writing. The process was slow. Awkward at first decades of repression do not dissolve overnight. But in time his eyes changed. There was color where before there had been gray. He was no longer merely respected, he was alive. We must each ask ourselves, whose life am I living? Whose approval am I chasing? Whose voice directs my steps? And more importantly, what would I do if no one judged me? If the answers frighten you, good. That fear is a sign of importance. The things that matter most are often hidden behind fear because they ask us to step outside the familiar, the safe, the predictable. But the cost of staying small is far greater than the risk of growing. Your passions are not random. They are echoes of your potential. They are the language your soul uses to speak. To ignore them is to mute your own existence. And if you have spent years walking a path that no longer fits or perhaps never did, there is no shame in turning back. The world will not collapse. Your value will not disappear. You will not be lost, you will be found. The journey back to yourself is not one of logic alone. It is emotional, raw, vulnerable. It requires mourning for time lost, for dreams deferred, but it also brings liberation. And it is in that liberation that true purpose is rediscovered. You are not here to live as a reflection. You are here to shine from the center of your being, to speak with your own voice, to create from your own spark. The approval of others may soothe your ego, but it will never satisfy your soul. Only alignment with your inner truth can do that. So listen. Listen not to the noise outside, but to the stirrings within. Your direction is not lost, it is waiting. Hidden beneath the layers of expectation and fear, it remains untouched. And once you remember it, once you choose it, life will begin to feel less like a performance and more like a song, your song, finally sung. The tragedy of the human condition is not simply that we suffer, but that in our suffering we often forget ourselves. We dissolve into the expectations of others like salt into water, disappearing so subtly that we hardly notice the erosion of our essence. Yet it is precisely this essence, this singular, unrepeatable configuration of soul and spirit that the world most desperately needs. Each individual carries within them a flame, a voice, a symbol that has never existed before and never will again. To dim that light in order to fit into the template society lays before us is not only a betrayal of self, but a theft from the collective soul of humanity. Many believe that harmony is found in agreement, in softening one's own edges to avoid offending the sensibilities of the crowd. We are taught to measure ourselves against others, to align with consensus, to nod politely even when the heart cries out in silent protest. We confuse this compliance for kindness, this approval for connection, but what is the cost of such peace? It is a counterfeit tranquility, a shallow stillness that masks the storm raging beneath. When we perform instead of live, when we conform instead of speak, we become actors in someone else's story, exiles from the land of our own soul. The unconscious does not tolerate deceit for long. It aches with the pain of the unlived life, the neglected truth, the ignored intuition. The more we wear masks, the more distant we become from the original face we were born with. And in the absence of that face, your face, the world loses something sacred. You are not here to echo, but to sing. Not here to impersonate, but to express. And the longer you linger in the shadows of should, the harder it becomes to return to the light of am. There comes a time sometimes in quiet despair, sometimes in explosive rebellion when the soul can no longer bear the weight of inauthenticity. It is then that the individual stands at the threshold, trembling, unsure. Will I be loved if I reveal myself? Will I belong if I stop performing? These questions are haunted by fear, but they are also doorways to freedom. For when you choose to no longer betray yourself in pursuit of external validation, you begin to feel something ancient stir within a presence, a clarity, a quiet power. Living authentically is not the abandonment of love or community. It is the foundation of both. For only in truth can we offer real love. Only from a grounded self can we participate in real connection. When we live in pretense, every relationship becomes conditional based not on who we are, but on who we pretend to be. It is exhausting, and in time it hollows us out. But when we choose authenticity, something remarkable happens. We stop trading our truth for acceptance. We stop being a commodity, shaped and packaged for consumption. Instead, we become a force. We live on purpose, no longer drifting in the currents of popular opinion. We carry within us the quiet defiance of a soul unafraid to be seen. That is when respect is born, not the shallow admiration that clings to surface, but the deep reverence that arises when someone sees another living without apology. People begin to recognize something in you that they've long buried in themselves. Your courage becomes their mirror. Your voice awakens their silence. Your presence reminds them of their own absence. And so, your authenticity is not selfish, it is sacred. It is a ripple in the unconscious field, inviting others to wake up from their slumber and remember who they are. There is immense responsibility in being who you truly are. It demands the death of illusion. It requires the courage to disappoint others in order to be in alignment with the truth. But the alternative to live a life shaped by fear and approval is to suffer quietly under the weight of a false identity. It is to look back at your days and wonder who lived them, because you cannot recognize yourself in their footsteps. The world does not need more polite smiles or empty nods. It does not need more people who say yes when they mean no, or who stay silent in the face of dishonesty. What the world needs is the sound of your true voice, trembling at first, perhaps, but growing stronger with each word. It needs your anger where there is injustice, your joy where there is numbness, your vision where there is confusion. And as you walk this path raw, exposed, uncertain, you will find that your very being becomes medicine. Not for everyone, but for those who are ready. You will not please all. You were never meant to, but you will serve truth. You will become a lighthouse for the lost, a rebel for the silenced, a sanctuary for the weary. To live authentically is not to live without fear, it is to walk through fear with eyes open and heart intact. It is to reclaim the sacred contract you made with life itself before you were named, before you were molded. It is to remember that you were born not to mimic, but to manifest, not to blend in, but to break through. Let the world feel the force of who you are. Let it be rattled by your honesty, unsettled by your depth, awakened by your presence. That is your gift. That is your offering, and to withhold it is to rob the world of something it can never find again, you. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be real, and in being real you give others permission to be the same. In your authenticity, you awaken a world that has grown weary of masks and starved of truth. So rise not in performance, but in presence. Rise not to fit in, but to belong. Rise not for applause, but for alignment. Because when you rise as yourself, the world does not just see you, it remembers something about itself it had long forgotten. So I ask you now, who are you when no one is watching? What would you say if you were not afraid of rejection? What dream have you buried beneath politeness? You were not born to be a mirror. You were born to shine even if your light is too bright for some. Stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. Your soul deserves more than approval. It deserves freedom. Let this be the moment you choose you not out of selfishness, but out of truth, because the world doesn't need another mask. It needs you.